President Joe Biden delusional? Biden and some of his aides told the Washington Post that if he had stayed in the 2024 race, he could have beaten President-elect Donald Trump. The Post reports that Biden and these aides have told people in recent days he could have defeated Trump, according to people familiar with their comments who spoke on condition of anonymity to describe private conversations. Aides say the president has been careful not to place blame on Harris or her campaign. End quote. Again, that's from the Washington Post. Biden's poor poll numbers and disastrous debate performance sparked concern over the summer. This led to top Democrats essentially forcing him out of the race. Here's Biden basically admitting that in a CBS interview in August.
But what happened was a number of my Democratic colleagues in the House and Senate thought that I was going to hurt them in the races. And I was concerned if I stayed in the race, that would be the topic. You'd be interviewing me about why did Nancy Pelosi say, why did someone, and I thought it'd be a real distraction.
Meanwhile, Democratic Connecticut Senator Richard Blumenthal told the Post that Biden had cut against the concept of him being a transitional president by seeking re-election. Quote, Biden ran on the promise that he was going to be a transitional president and, in effect, have one term before handing it off to another generation, Blumenthal said. I think his running again broke that concept, the conceptual underpinning of the theory that he would end the Trump appeal, he would defeat Trumpism and enable a new era.
Many Democrats blame Biden for Harris's loss since he dropped out of the race so late. Biden's aides also said his old-school governing style didn't mix well with today's political climate. Yeah. His national security advisor, Jake Sullivan, for instance, said the president has been operating on a time horizon measured in decades, while the political cycle is measured in 4 years. He's kind of saying the Bene Gesserit line from Doom, our plans are measured in centuries.
I mean, can I just pick up that point very quickly? Because this argument that Jake Sullivan is making, which is, oh, over time it will come to seem to be a great presidency, the policy with which Jake Sullivan is most identified, which is the policy in Gaza, I think will look ever more catastrophic and indefensible as time goes by, because I think it has been the great moral failing of the Biden presidency. Anyway.
I think that's probably a good guess. The idea that Biden was going to win if he stayed in is just, I guess you can't totally dismiss a counterfactual like that. We'll never know what would have happened had Biden stayed in the race, but the most likely thing is Trump would have won an even more crushing victory. That's what all the polling suggested. The polling, if anything, has now underrated Trump somewhat in three sequential elections, most dramatically in 2020, even though he did lose. The polling was so wildly off in Biden's favor, and then this time it was just slightly a little bit off in Kamala's favor. The idea that Biden was going to win is kind of laughable. I mean, they're not putting their names to that statement. These are anonymous aides saying, "Oh yeah, we would have done so good." It was also mostly the same team in place. It was the same people running the campaign. And so I appreciate he doesn't want to bash Harris too much, but he should be bashing himself. He put her in a very difficult situation that she did not significantly improve upon. But here we are.
No, here we are indeed. I mean, I do take the argument at some level that people do consider President Biden fundamentally a decent enough person. But his great flaw politically, it seems to me, is a kind of mix or stew of pride and ego. And these tend to lead him into terrible decisions. So the point that Blumenthal made there on the record, I think is an obviously correct point, that Biden was elected, oldest president elected in history when he won the office in the first place. And the whole idea was he was the person who was going to stop Trump first time around. He was the reassuring older white guy, not very left-wing, had been kind of center-left all his political career. He would stop Trump and then he would make way for someone else. He then decided that he was somehow uniquely capable of defeating Trump again. He and his aides clearly tried to play down any loss of cognitive ability until that was left on raw and horrendous display during that debate, after which the Democratic Party realized that Biden was almost certainly going to lose. So this idea that after that is all over, you turn around and say, oh, well, I would have beaten him, really. There is no empirical evidence for that at all.
And his decision to stay in and run again is easier to defend, I guess, if the cognitive decline, the collapse was abrupt and sudden and very late in the cycle. But what we're hearing from reporting from the Wall Street Journal and other places now is that this was ongoing for much of the presidency, gaps in awareness that became greater as they went on. I'm going to have more to say about this in a Radar for tomorrow, but this is the great fiction of the Biden administration, that he was good to go, and then suddenly there was some collapse at the end. There are now serious questions, I think, throughout his presidency of his ability to make important, to react in the moment to things that were happening. And so the idea that he should have sought a second term, given that he was already having problems from the inception of his presidency, that now seems just criminal. I mean, not literally criminal, but in terms of a moral crime of trying to pretend that this person was, yes, uniquely qualified when he was not even. There were serious questions about his ability to do the job from the get-go.
Yeah, I mean, I do think the decline appeared to accelerate. I think that is certainly true. But I also think a lot of Democrats would share the critique that you and I are making, which is that by staying in the race, there was a whole waterfall of effects from that. He stayed in to the point where it was obviously only really going to be Kamala Harris who could replace him, as opposed to an open primary where another candidate could have emerged. She had 107 days for her campaign. Maybe she would have lost anyway, who knows? But it put her in a difficult position, and it put the party in a position where it realistically couldn't choose anyone other than her. And I think a lot of Democrats look back on that with considerable anger.
Right. If he had cleared out of the way earlier, you would have had time to find out if Democratic primary voters actually want Kamala Harris or someone else. She would have had more opportunity to make her case, which could have been to her benefit, or if it turns out, she really doesn't have a vision to sell, people were never so in love with this political figure to be the leader of the Democratic Party, and there would have been times for other people to make their cases. Some of these popular governors of must-win states for the Democratic Party could have made their cases because it's exactly as you say, because it was so late, it was really going to be Kamala, and she didn't have much time to do anything with that. Biden is, leaving office as a transitional figure, a transition back to Trump, transitioned away from Trump and back to Trump. His legacy in the moment is certainly not going to be very, very good. He can hope for, we're going to talk about Jimmy Carter in a minute, who just passed away, who is, I think, getting, when you pass away, people try to say positive things, and I even, frankly, do have a few positive things to say about Jimmy Carter, so maybe one day that will come for Joe Biden as well, but I don't know.
I think any one-term president always has a bit of a stench of failure around them. I think if Trump had lost this year, that stench of failure from 2020 would have clung to him. Now he's in this very different, almost unique, barring Grover Cleveland, position of the non-consecutive terms. I don't anticipate Biden running again in 2028 to try to replicate that, although I know it's a scenario that amuses you.
Grover Cleveland is actually one of my favorite presidents. He's a beloved president among libertarians.
Really?
So, yes. Very limited government Democrat, wanted a humble foreign policy, low taxes, low regulation, leave people alone. There's a lot of lessons we could live from the humble tenure of Grover Cleveland.
And a great name to boot.
And a great name. All right, we'll be back with more Rising in just a minute. Stay tuned.